Straighten your tie. Sorry. That's the ADD in me.
I know. So it's Doug McIntyre, the editor-in-chief at 24/7 Wall Street, here with Lee Jackson, who's been our head markets editor, corporate editor, stock picker extraordinaire for well over a decade. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How about yourself?
I'm doing all right. So should people go to college? It's a great question, and it depends on where you end up in life, which is hard to guess early on. But how do you answer that question for somebody who's 17 or 18 and also their parents?
It is a tough question. And so many people that age, at 18, do you really know for sure what you want to do for the rest of your life? I think college is a wonderful place for people who have a firm knowledge of what they want to do. Be a lawyer, be a doctor, something along those lines. But I think for many people, especially in this day and age, I don't think a lot of people know what they want to do. So maybe it's not a good investment.
If you go to Europe, much more in the United States, people become tradesmen. There's this whole system throughout much of
Right.
Europe that, if you are going to eventually become a plumber, that there's a lot of work done so that people can learn to be a plumber. You don't have to take 4 years. You don't have to, understand what Einstein did, because maybe not everybody wants to know. You end up with a very good job. You become a master at it, and you can literally do it your whole life.
Absolutely. My stepfather was a custom builder in Birmingham, Michigan, which you're in that area, Bloomfield Hills. And the guys that worked for him had worked for his father, who was more of a commercial builder. And these guys, everywhere from European, Italian carpenters to the plumber to electricians, they had more than one builder they built for, and they constantly had work.
Yeah. Let's help people do the math for a second. And I'm going to give you an extreme, and we can work back from that. So I know a kid who's in his early 40s right now. He's the director of the stroke unit at a hospital. I'm going to make a guess. He makes $500,000 a year. This kid went to college, 4 years of medical school, 2 years after that doing something, then 2 years as a fellow. And then finally he gets a real job where he gets paid. Now, his student loans in aggregate were probably $350,000. I don't know what the interest is on a student loan right now, but if at any point along the way he wasn't going to hit a spot where he was making high six figures, his ability to pay down that loan, it would have taken him a decade.
Oh, easily, I would think. Sure.
So a couple of things happen with somebody like that. The first one is that even in their productive years financially, their discretionary income can be quite low. You make a lot of money, but so much of it goes out in terms of paying for student loans. Economically, that person is really not well off till they're in their mid 40s.
Yeah, I think that's the case. And I know a lot of physicians, high placed physicians in their 40s and 50s, who are leaving their practice because the malpractice insurance is so onerous and goes up every single year. And they just, there's not enough margin to make it worthwhile to stay in there, especially with the risk involved, that even if you do have malpractice insurance.
Yeah. Again, let's go back let's take a look at this from the standpoint of the student. The parent says, I'm not going to pay your tuition. This is easy calculus. If your parents say to you, you're all set, we're going to pay for you.
Yeah,
but if
right.
you're a kid and it's going to cost you $50,000 a year to go to college, you've now got a $200,000 loan. And let's say it's low. The government is charging you a 5% coupon, which would be a great deal. Do you want to be financially buried for a decade when you can't be taking money and basically putting it aside. This is a long looking this over decades. You can't put money away for the latter part of your work life when you're
Right.
taking that money and you're using it to pay student loans.
Well, especially if you're a physician or say a dentist and you want to open an office and you need a staff. And so a lot of the cash flow from your business goes into just running the business, which is true of most independent, business people. But yeah, I think it's becomes very difficult. And then you're 45 and you're like, wait a minute, I should have half a million in my IRA or my 401k, and I have very little.
If I'm a parent or a student, I'm looking at something else, and that is that everybody wants to go to college and they want to study Shakespeare. I mean, the great books or whatever it might be. Some kids go for computer science or pre-med, but I think it's important for parents and teachers to understand something. The differential between what you earn if you come out with a degree in liberal arts versus a degree in computer science, the amount that you pay in loans is the same, you know,
Or very close. Yeah, absolutely.
but for 4 years, same, I'm in the same college, same costs for food, shelter. I come out the other end and my lifetime earnings capacity may be $1 million greater if I come out with something that's in high demand, a
Oh,
tech job,
absolutely. Sure.
compared to somebody who's going to go work as a manager at a Walmart because, they've got a good education, but their education doesn't allow them to do much more. Um, should the advice here be, even though it's very hard, think about what you want to major in, not because of what you're interested in, but because of whether you're going to be able to pay for your life.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, and that's just realistic. I think we discussed this the other day, Doug. Both myself and my son went to for lack of a better term, a vocational school. I went to a place in Detroit that you're familiar with, Specs Howard, which is a
Yeah.
complete media school now. And my son went to the Art Institute in Dallas. He was able to cut through some of the preliminary, courses you have to take in an associate's degree like English and stuff like that in high school and graduate early. So he walked out at 20 years old into a BBD&O owned advertising agency making almost $50,000 at 20. And that was 19 years ago. And he has carved out an extremely good career. Now, I didn't stay in radio and television, but I got a job from that outstanding school in Detroit, Specs Howard. So I think for many people, they should consider that alternative.
Well, I'm going to give you some points of advice, and then when I'm done, tell me what you think of them, because this is the way that I would look at college now that I've been to college. I've had kids that'll go to college or have, and their kids eventually will. Number one, if you don't know what you want to major in, err towards things that will tend to pay you well based on your degree. Now, obviously, if you want to be a poet, you don't go in and get computer science. But if you're unsure about what you want to do, there's nothing wrong with trying to get a degree in something that down the road is going to pay you well. So that would be my rule number one.
Absolutely. Sure. That's a good idea.
Rule number two, if you're going to go to graduate school, business school, medical, think hard about whether or not that's going to pay for itself. I think if you were to say to me, business school, law school, medical school, the chances that those things pay for themselves are pretty decent. If you're going to go to school for architecture, that's a lot more of a crapshoot. So the next advice I would give to students or parents underwriting the education is think very hard about, if you're going to go to a graduate school, you should know more when you go to graduate school about what you want to do than you did when you went into college. So that fork in the road is even
Absolutely. Sure.
more important, because if you make a mistake there, you've made a mistake that may take up 7 years of your life with graduate school and not 4. So, that would be my second piece of advice. The next one is that people don't look at college loans before they take them out and graph what's it going to cost for me to pay for these loans. And I'll make this up, it's going to cost me $50,000 a year for 4 years. Here's the interest rate. And so here's when it's expected.
Can you go to an Ivy League school for 50,000 in
No,
this day and age?
I'm not really. Talking about Yale. Let's say that it's, I don't know, Ohio State.
Yeah. So big state schools and schools like that are probably in that ballpark, right?
Right. So the next thing I would do is when people talk about student loans, you listen to these young people say, well, my student loans is like $100,000. It's like, well, did you sit down before you started and do the math? Or did you decide that once you got out, you looked at the bill and said, I can't believe this is $100,000? So my next advice would be to both parents and students is game it out. Think about how much it's actually going to cost you based on what the 4-year bill is going to be, what the interest rate's going to be, and over what period you're going to have to pay it off. Because at least then you've educated yourself about at what point in your lifetime you're going to be 28, 38, whatever it is, when you're actually going to be getting an income where there's a good chance you can do something like buy a house. So to me, that's another very important rule.
Oh, absolutely. And I think for many young people, and I don't know that this has ever really changed that much over the years, but maybe it's smart to take a year or two and work a little bit or work a job and get a better sense of what you want to do before you commit to that kind of loan. And maybe that makes some sense.
Well, the next piece of advice I would have for students is if you can go to a state school and get an equivalent education, and there's a big tuition difference, go to the state school.
Oh, absolutely. Sure.
If you're in a state like Michigan, there are a lot of private colleges, but Michigan State and the University of Michigan are considered top 100 in the country.
Well, especially Michigan
University. So why would I take out student loans for $50,000 when I can get a similar education for $20,000 if I'm in state? So my next rule would be to pass on to students and to their parents is go the state school route. If your diploma says something on it, that isn't quite as prestigious or whatever, the difference in that $40,000 you're going to have to pay off is a very big difference.
It's a huge difference. And I think at the end of the day, for many people that do go to state schools, especially like you said, if you're in state and if you're in maybe the top 10% of your class, you do very well. But my niece, for instance, wants to go to Texas A&M, but she lives in Texas and wasn't in the top 10%. So she's going to go to another school that's part of the A&M system for a year. And then she's going to go and she'll be a sophomore at the A&M next year.
And here's my last piece of advice. There are employers who will pay some or all of your student loans. It's one of these, it's a help get somebody through the door to work at the company, help retain somebody. So it may be, if you join our company, we'll pay off 10% of your student loan the day. And then each year you stay, we'll pay off another X percent. So when you get out of college or you get out of grad school, look around, see if there are places that you would consider working that would help pay your student loans down, because it's the same thing. If you have two places that you'd like to work and it's sort of a tie, you want to pick the one where you have a chance for them to pay down your student loans, or do you want to pick the one where that's not an option? So I would say to people, be realistic, because a lot of student loans literally may mean you can't buy a house until you're 40 years old.
Yeah, and it's restrictive. It's funny. I saw an interesting thing today where the president said he will pay down 1.2 billion of students' loans. And I think that infuriates a lot of people. But I read through the article and I thought it was interesting because the only loans they got paid off or paid down were like less than $12,000. And the person who had taken the loan out had been paying on it for over 10 years. So that did kind of surprise me. But yeah, most people won't get the advantage of a government pay down on their loan.
Well, in one of our conversations, we can talk about the politics and economics of forgiving student loans, but we'll leave that for the next time around.
Sure.
Great conversation about student loans in college. And I think, for those of you who watch or listen, this is some very good advice, and most of it's practical. It doesn't require, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure it out.
No,
Lee,
no. And again, it's worth considering all the angles like you put forth.
Yeah. Take it easy.
Okay. Thanks, Doug.